Okay guys, so last time we started to talk about the types of selection and we finished up with our stabilizing, directional, and disruptive selection. So I'm going to continue to finish up our last chapter and just go over some things that we need for our keystone test. So first thing, and we already talked about this last chapter, was speciation. If you remember, we went over divergent and convergent evolution. And let's talk about divergent here real quick. So for divergent evolution, here's our little phylogenetic tree here. Right here is going to be our common ancestor. Okay. Now, whatever that common ancestor is going to be the past relative of this species here, we'll just call that species X, and this species here, which are species Y. So these two species came into existence because something changed and that common ancestor went extinct and we had speciation occur. So speciation is going to be when we form new species that are different than the older ones. So X and Y came into existence when the common ancestor right here at this node went extinct. And that's all speciation is. Sometimes we'll see that when speciation occurs, they may look really, really similar to the common ancestor, or they might look really, really different, depending on how big that change is, because with that change, it brings about a need for speciation. So here is cats, nice phylogenetic tree for cats. So we have a regular domesticated house cat here. We have the cheetah, we have the lion, and then we have this guy, maybe a jaguar over here, maybe a black leopard, I'm not sure, okay? It's hard to tell from that picture. But they all came from some kind of common ancestor, and it gave rise to all these different cats. So they all filled some part of the environment in a particular area. Another way you can think about it is we have this common ancestor, okay? This is just a potato head example. But with speciation, guys, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are going to survive. All the new species are going to survive. So pretend this one does speciate. Let's look at the 4 species that it gave rise to. Well, we got this one over here, our first guy. And if you notice, he doesn't have eyes, he doesn't have a nose, he doesn't have a mouth. So he's probably going to go extinct very quickly. The second one, he's got eyes, he's got nose, he's got a lovely mustache there, but there's no mouth, so he can't eat, so he's probably going to go extinct. The third one looks pretty good. The fourth one, once again, no mouth or anything, so he's probably going to go extinct. So a lot of these species might still go extinct even when speciation occurs. So there's 2 different propositions of how speciation occurs. The first one is gradualism. So gradualism is when the species slowly changes over time to finally reach the end result. So, and I'll show you, I got a picture of it in the next slide. It takes a long time with gradualism for the species to look the way it does. The second one is called punctuated equilibrium. So this states that instead of gradualism, where it's taking a very long time, punctuated equilibrium, it's very rapid. It's just like, okay, at one time we had this species and 1,000 years later, completely changed. That is very, very quick in the whole timeline of Earth, where gradualism is going to take millions of years. So punctuated equilibrium, very quickly, we have changes in these species. They're very rapid. Gradualism takes a long time. So here is gradualism. You can see the butterflies are slowly morphing into 2 species. We have a slow, steady change there. Here is punctuated equilibrium. Time, not so long of a time, and we don't have many different colors of butterflies in between the common ancestor and there are new ones up there. Okay, so it's very quick. Now, which one is correct between these two on how evolution happens? punctuated equilibrium is the correct way that evolution occurs. All right, we're going to go over the survivorship curves now. We're going to think of all different types of organisms for these. So we're going to have 3 different curves: type 1, type 2, and type 3. If you look, type 1, humans are on there, so we'll talk about us. Okay. Type 2, these are things like birds. Okay. Type 3, we got trees and some other organisms on there. So let me go over each one of them for you. Here's type 1. So it was the red line up here. What this tells us is that we are going to have a lot of organisms surviving, and then once they reach around their maximum age, they're going to start dying off very quickly. So we live for a long time on type 1, not a whole lot die, and then at the end, we all die. These are going to be like a lot of the animals you guys can think of: us, lions, tigers, bears, okay? Types of organisms that don't really have like predation on them. They don't have a lot of predators, okay? Type 2. This is where the probability of dying does not change throughout life. So like things like birds and lizards, they're not going to live as long as us. And every day is kind of a fight for survival, where we're going to have a lot dying each day, but that continues throughout the whole organism's lifetime. Type 3 is kind of the sad one. Type 3, when they are young, there is a very low chance that they are going to survive. And if they survive past being young, they might live a long time. Okay? So it's the exact opposite of type 1. So these are things like oysters, salmon, sea turtles. Okay? Sea turtles, a lot of them die right when they're born. Okay, so we're going to go over, and I know we talked about like genetic drift last time. I'm going to talk about another thing of evolution here. It's called a bottleneck population. This is when we have some kind of disaster and the population only has a certain number left after that disaster. So it cut down the population drastically. What can happen when a natural disaster occurs is it can get rid of a lot of genetic variation in that population, which is bad. After that, guys, when the population starts to reproduce again, the genetic variation just isn't there anymore. So that's bad. And you guys can see here we had 3 different variations in here. We had a yellow, a white, and a blue. And then some natural disaster happened, and the only ones left are the blue and very, very few white. So what's going to happen is we are going to have that blue continue to reproduce. The white, maybe, since there's only one left, we really don't know. Okay, but that's going to limit all of the genetic variation in that species. So after this, we can have something called a founder effect. What happens here is we are going to have a new population is started by only those few left in the population. Now, with this, just from the last slide even, there's not going to be a whole lot of genetic diversity left in that population. So we're either going to get mutations where we are going to increase our genetic variation, or that species will probably have very little genetic variation left and they will go extinct. Not very quickly, but fairly quickly. Okay. Symbiosis. Symbiosis is pretty fun. There's 3 types of symbiotic relationships. There's mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. So I know you guys went over these in like 7th grade, and you probably only went over mutualism. This is where both of the organisms that are participating in this relationship are going to benefit. There's also commensalism where one benefits and one is just like, whatever. It doesn't benefit, it doesn't get harmed. And the last one is parasitism. One benefits and one is harmed. So for mutualism, this is where they are going to both benefit. So these birds live on top of zebras and they eat the insects off of the zebras. So the birds get a nice snack and the zebras stay clean of all the insects. That's mutualism. They're both benefiting. Commensalism, one benefits and the other one is kind of left unharmed. It doesn't do too much of anything. So crab moving into shells, the crab gets a nice home and the shell just, whatever. Last one, parasitism. The goal of parasitism, which is kind of weird to think about, is for the one harming the other individual, don't kill the host. Because once the host dies, it can't, get whatever it's getting off of that organism anymore. So one like this is fleas and dogs. If a dog has fleas, the fleas get a nice shelter, but the dog gets harmed. His quality of life or her quality of life goes down. So that's parasitism. So here is an example of these birds that live by cattle, and they are always around the cattle. Oops. Sorry guys, I forgot to. So what they'll do, guys, is they will eat all the insects on that cattle, and in turn they get a snack and the cow stays clean. So this one would be our mutualism. All right. Spiders and trees. So on the trees, you guys see the nice black widow here. The spider is going to form this nice big web here. Okay. This is actually, now if we're talking about the bugs would be parasitism. This one, kind of commensalism, because the web isn't really harming the tree that much. You can also think of this, now most of the time the spiders are going to be getting flies flying in, but if it's getting insects on the tree, that actually could be mutualism, because maybe those insects are harming the tree. But more than likely, guys, this is commensalism. The spider gets the web in the tree and the tree really isn't harmed. So for the warthog and the mongoose here, the mongoose actually will eat ticks off of the warthog. So it helps the warthog, helps the mongoose. So that one would be mutualism. Tapeworms. Obviously, this is parasitism. If you have a tapeworm in you, it's going to eat the food that you're ingesting. So you will lack some of the nutrients. And the tapeworm is going to eat all of that. Kind of gross. Clownfish and sea anemone. So the sea anemone provides a shelter for the clownfish, and the clownfish will clean the inside of the anemone. So this is also mutualism. All right, plover and the crocodile. No, the crocodile is not going to eat the plover. If so, that would be definitely parasitism. Kind of, because the plover would be dead. But the bird actually will clean the inside of the crocodile's mouth and get a nice meal that way. So this is, again, mutualism. The crocodile actually will not eat the bird, which is kind of cool because it knows it's getting a benefit. Here is the puffin, and it will go into rabbit shelters, little holes that they make. But the cool thing is it does not go and take those holes away from the rabbit. What it will do is wait till they leave, and then once the rabbits have moved on, it'll take those empty ones. So this is commensalism because it's not harming the rabbits at all, and the puffin's getting a nice home. Barnacles and whales. So you would think this would harm the whale, but it actually doesn't. It doesn't harm the whale at all. The barnacles get a nice ride, and the whales are completely fine. So if you ever see a whale with barnacles on it, it's not a big deal. It's not parasitism. Okay, so last thing I got to go over today with you guys is the biomes. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly. The Earth is divided into different levels of organization. So we have first the biosphere. In other words, Earth and all of its atmosphere. Break it down a little bit into a smaller group. We have an ecosystem. This is all the organisms that are living and non-living in a particular area. After that, we are going to go to just all the living things in that area, and that's called a community. So difference between an ecosystem and a community. Ecosystem is all the living and non-living things. Community, break it down into only the living things. We then get into a population, which is just talking about an individual species in that community. And then we get down to, oh my goodness, we get down to the individual organism, where that's just one member of one species in a particular area. All right. Yeah, that's not a real bug, guys. That's just a predator's face on something. There we go. That's a little better. Oh my goodness, is that not adorable? Oh, he's eating a strawberry. Wow, that's cute. All right. So that's the breakdown of all of our ecosystem, or parts of a ecosystem. So when we were talking about that, guys, I'm talking about an ecosystem, and it has the living and non-living parts. The living parts are called the biotic factors, and the non-living parts are called the abiotic factors. All right. Last thing is the biomes here. We'll go through these really quickly. Tundra. It is cold. Definitely cold. It covers about 20% of Earth's surface. We'll see that pretty much the furthest distance from our equator. We have the taiga next. It's also known as the boreal forest. We are not going to have the cold temperatures in the taiga as we do in the tundra. So it's going to be made of mostly pine trees, things that can still stand that cold environment. Next one is the wetlands. Yeah, the land is covered by water. Pretty easy there. Coral reef is our next biome. So we are going to have the most species in a coral reef. It is going to be very diverse with all the species that are in there. Next one, tropical rainforest. This is going to be very hot, very humid climate. It's going to be close to the equator, so it's going to be super hot, completely opposite of our tundra. The deciduous forest, this is kind of where we live. So we are going to have our seasons. We're going to have summer, winter, spring, and fall, depending on where the Earth is from going around the sun. And that's still going to be far away from the equator, but not as far from the tundra. And then grasslands. All right, this is going to be like Africa, areas like that, kind of where you would see like lions, tigers living. Cheetahs, that kind of thing, right? Obviously not tigers in Africa, but they're going to be covered by grasses. We're going to see, a lot of wildlife and a lot of predation in these areas. And our last one is the desert. Very, very, very hot during the day. Does cool down a good bit at night. All right, so yeah, you would think you wouldn't need a jacket at night, but probably a good idea. So. Living conditions are very, very bad here. It's hard to find a whole lot of life, and the organisms that live in them are pretty well adapted to living in that hostile environment. All right, guys. So that is it for all of our loose ends that we had to tie up for the end of the year. We're going to just start our Keystone review, and then we will be good for the test. Have a good rest of your day, guys.